Okay. And it came from a few places. One was this finger tut I was doing. You know, there's the walking, but I was turning it into like a roll and keep them connected like that. So you could like melt it down into a line, you know, things like that. And I was just using it only as that for the longest time. And then I found another similar motion. I was like doing liquid, like my arms are, all this surface is resting on the surface of a water, and there's like waves under you, and you're following it, letting it move you around, riding it, getting caught in the current, pulling back, you know, dropping. So you're controlling the space in here. It's like a surface of water. But then I moved that just to the hands, and I have this circle. And I noticed this connection here between the fingers feels like this. It's the same thing. And when I started to identify it like that, you can like fix one of the ends. Fix this end and orbit it. Right? And now you can alternate your stepping. So normal liquid, you have that one connection between. So it makes sense to run it over lines. But this is more of, this is like the second insight I made into this. There's a line segment you're controlling. These points are the endpoints on that line. So you can shrink the line, open it, wiggle the line, keep the end up here, separate the two half circles. Circles where the endpoints are now in the center. Now you have this line in the middle. Keep the top fixed. And like you can also rotate it into this line. And all those variations. You can also like hold a box, move it around. So now you have this 2D little plane you're moving around. You can open up. Oh, shit. So now you're manipulating like a piece of paper or a ribbon or something, and you can put that into your liquid and give it more depth. So that's 2-point flow, and some of the later ideas that came out of it. I watched this presentation by Michael Motion, the guy who came up with contact juggling. He did a presentation at TED. This guy has not only mastered juggling, but mastered every object manipulation art form on the planet and created some of his own. So things like poi, devil sticks, Chinese yo-yos, like all that manipulating an object and making it do stuff, he's committed his whole life to mastering those things. And that talk was like amazing. And he breaks down the technique and shows how technique can be used to fill space in time and distances around you. And he used this term spatial palette. So now, any technique we have can occupy all this grid space, sideways, rotate the whole plane. But within that, we've traditionally only had that one point that's flowing around through it. But now, how do lines move through that space? Like, how do like solid shapes shift around and move through it? So I've been trying to answer those questions. And people like shifted shapes have some solutions to it. He had this style called Houdoken, which I was doing some of, where he makes this box, holds the box here, brings it up. He's just framing this, he's basically moving this square shape around his body, doing all these variations. So that organized way of using a single technique, an idea, filling all the space with it, and finding a way to step through it all, the entirety of it all. And that brings you to the idea of like a scale. So Icon was showing the framework he uses and how it frames things around the body. You can find an organized way to move through all that. Like a scale of music, you have all possible notes, and you're moving through it in an organized pattern, from bottom to top, or descending. So the skill I used from shifted shapes, I got this from a popper named Future, and he learned it from shifted shapes at Unity and Respect in Boston. It starts here. The mechanic for this type is just this sort of open and closing, pinching, open, close, pinch. So using that technique to fill the spatial palette, it looks like this. You can do things like start on opposite ends, work your way in. What? because all of that is only like 3 moves. 1, 2, 3. And you're just doing it up on this top, this side, this side. So there's not a lot of information. You're just covering a lot of space with this small technique. And I think that's important to find those grid systems like that. Then you can like make it 3D. You can use that exact same climb in the front now. Yeah. And you can combine it. But once you have that, that foundation, that scale lets you know when you're in a right position and a wrong position. You will instantly feel like, oh, that doesn't belong because I've never done it before. The point of having a scale is to compress every position into something you can practice. The scale I use leaves out this one because not everyone can do it. But you can make scales that include weird positions, but I try to have ones that you could teach to like children. So everyone should be able to move like this, right? And I think Liquid doesn't have that yet. We have a lot of techniques that can climb around in space, but we don't necessarily have to define it. But I think we could if we put our minds together.
Hey, I'm working on one with Weber.
Yeah, I know you are. It'll be awesome. One of the techniques that two-point flow led me to was inspired by micromotion and contact juggling. And I happened to have some contact juggling balls at my house, so I just picked them up and started doing some point and line manipulation with it. Okay, somewhere in here.
Go to the ball, find the ball.
Right. Now, I don't know if this is proper contact juggling technique, but I was just using my understanding of isolation and points because I wanted something that wasn't all this, because I think I know what's going on here. It's distracting. What I really want to address are points, keeping points in a confined space. So on the hand, you have this quadrant that the ball can, on the front fingers, it's fixed in space here. On the back, and when you get 2 balls, you can start fixing one. They can walk, they can replace. Orbit. Orbit, 3 points. Orbit center point. Orbit green, alternate.
Oh no! No, it would have crashed.
I should have bought one. So that playing with just points and not all this led me to coming back to all this. So I started looking at postures and trying to keep the points in those fixed. So to keep this fixed and move the line segment, the same line segment, but now you have extra points in it. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can hold this whole thing. Oh. Move it around. Right, so that it's more than 2-point flow. It becomes like as many points as you can fit into it. The whole thing can move around. So this posture here and here. hardest part about it was stillness. To preserve this visual information, you have to get into it and just not move. If you get into it and not move, you can start to trace it with itself. Fit it together like bricks. Line it up, break it apart. And we do these things. They're mirrors, contouring, tracing, but usually the shapes we're dealing with are constantly changing. But having fixed shapes, like a build, allows you to explore that sort of thing. And you can make that change happen through a fixed point. Just like when you wave, you have the point moving through you, you're not moving. Or you can move through the point. The same thing with all this. I don't know what to call this. Kai calls this the lotus posture because it's like you're holding a blooming, I guess you could use it in tuts.
It's like a candle rack or something.
Yeah, that's a good call.
But that fixed line is in there right now. And it stays fixed. Doesn't move. Splits apart into this line. Now, because I created that and spatially isolated, I then went back to digitz techniques that weren't necessarily spatially isolated. Like say you have this, then you have this. One has a fixed point isolation, the other one's just doing this stuff. You know, the point's moving through. You're not moving through the point. Rolls were one that the first one I've started with. So I try to fix on the pinky and keep it stuck there. So now I have this orbiting thing. You can do it on the pointer finger as well. And then you can link them together. They're linked. But just approaching the idea of fixing points, making lines, filling space, is a really good conceptual foundation, design foundation for finding new technique. And that's what two-point flow was for me. It got me to start looking at those things in that way. Just keeping that center point and just playing with it, moving it around. Because it's like contact juggling. It's like you're manipulating an object that no one can see. So you're trying to reveal it to people, you know, or hide it or something. But yeah, so.
Nice. Houdoken.